Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. There's a new set of terminology coming out of the KZN ANC conference. The so-called Taliban group can be crying victory after Siboniso Duma was elected KwaZulu-Natal party chairperson yesterday, defeating the so-called Ankole group's choice, and current provincial premier Sihle Zikalala. Duma obtained 930 votes to Zikalala's 665. The Ankole group is obviously associated with President Cyril Ramaphosa and possible backing for his bid to stay on as party leadership. But what does it all mean? Joining us is Qaanitah Hunter, politics editor at News 24, for her take. A very good morning to you, afternoon rather, Qaanitah. Thank you for your time. As seen in Mpumalanga, Limpopo and the Eastern Cape, it was another clean sweep for Siboniso Duma, who received the 930 votes to Zikalala's 665 ballots. What does this win mean, especially as we're now looking to the build-up to the national conference in December?
Well, I mean, it means slate politics is alive and thriving in the ANC, and that was, consistent with the other conferences that you see, that once the chairperson is elected, all of the other positions are quite predictable, and that was what happened exactly in KwaZulu-Natal, where the Duma faction and slate won the conference by a big majority. And this conference, it's very important to look at that majority because they were up against the incumbents, Sihle Zikalala and Mtuli, who were the, vying for the same positions and lost by some 200 votes. Now, the important bit of this conference is that the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal is a huge indicator. What happens in this province is an indicator of the turbulence that you will see nationally. It's the reason why when you look at what's happening in KwaZulu-Natal, you see a number, dozens of ANC national leaders that descended on KwaZulu-Natal because of what it means for the national leadership race. Why is that? Simply because of the numbers of KwaZulu-Natal. It's the largest province of the ANC in terms of membership. And then the second important bit is that it is from KZN, where everyone has expected a defiance of some sort to erupt against President Cyril Ramaphosa's bid for a second term. And so far in other provincial conferences, he has secured a very distinct endorsement for his second term. And what happened yesterday, the election results of Siboniso Duma and that slate, so-called Taliban slate, is now a spanner in the works for that. Not particularly because President Cyril Ramaphosa needs KwaZulu-Natal, but what it brings about is instability, potholes, meanders from now till December.
And the newly elected slate, the Taliban, as you make mention of, won all the top positions. Political factions were the massive factor in this conference. The Ankole cattle slate was up against them and the others. It was a fierce battle. What do these factions have in common, as they were going into this fierce battle for leadership?
The thing that they had in common is that they were a euphemism for a bigger political race, and that is obviously the ANC presidency. And whether you like it or not, Ankole coalesced around President Cyril Ramaphosa, so all his allies fell within one faction, and all of those who were anti-Cyril Ramaphosa kind of coalesced into this opposing faction, and that's why you had that fierce battle. That it may not have been so specifically about Siboniso Duma's leadership capabilities, that probably was not a consideration to delegates or to regional leaders giving orders to delegates at the conference. It was a vote against something, and that vote was against Cyril Ramaphosa, whether they want to concede it or not, because the tone of this conference is very clear in that. And remember, it's not unexpected in Paul, because if you look at what has been happening in the regional conferences in KwaZulu-Natal, which the ANC almost works in a primary system where you get a good sense of what's to come if you look at, the conferences that happened preceding it. And when you looked at those regional conferences in KwaZulu-Natal, you saw, first of all, a lot of new blood, generational change, young, youthful youth league leaders taking over in regions as chairs and secretaries. You also saw them traveling to Nkandla, where they basically disputed the Provincial Executive Committee decision to not support former President Jacob Zuma. There was also the consideration of the ANC has not been active in relation to the disputes around the Nazareth Baptist Church, as well as the Zulu royal family. And so there was this mood coming and this dissatisfaction of the leadership of Sihle Zikalala by regional leadership collectives in the province. So, if you ask me, was it a tight race? Yes, it was. But was it completely unexpected? No. And so what these two factions became, it really was not then about voting whether Sihle Zikalala would be a better leader of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal versus Siboniso Duma and his great leadership prowess. It really was, what are we voting for and voting against in relation? It was euphemistic in its nature to say this vote is a vote for the status quo, and as a result, Cyril Ramaphosa's second term, or this vote is to upset the status quo and to allow for something to rear its head to contend against the Ramaphosa faction. Now we know that you cannot look at these results without reflecting on the role of someone like Zweli Mkhize, the former health minister, who's played a very important role as his shadow loomed large over this conference, and particularly the language that he's been expressing of late about the treatment of former President Jacob Zuma, and almost positioning himself as the face of this alternative that we've not seen manifest itself from the beginning of the year or up until now. We don't know who the serious contender against Ramaphosa will be on that ballot in December. Yes, people have lifted their hands, but seriously, what does that mean? And so this result really paves the way for a lot of turbulence, a lot of horse trading, a lot of instability between now and December. There's a point that I want to make, Mpho, about looking beyond December as the sum of a second term for Ramaphosa or not. And because there's an interesting debate, an interesting thread that we see coming. And this is the so-called Adiwele manifestation. And the best way to explain it is a push by younger leaders within the party who served in the youth league, who trying to elbow and muscle their way into top leadership and trying to sort of remove a brand of old ANC leaders from their positions. And you saw it manifest itself in Gauteng. You saw it in the age of the PEC additional members in Limpopo. You saw the same thing in pockets of Eastern Cape. And so that thread is finding its way and found root now in KwaZulu-Natal, where it's not a RET versus Cyril Ramaphosa. It's this, we are coalescing together, despite our own factional fights or our own personal interests that we're fighting everywhere in the province. We're coming together on one sort of strand, and that strand is a push for generational change in leadership and for a brand of younger ANC leaders to push through the glass ceiling in the party. And I think that after what we saw last night in KwaZulu-Natal, that sort of Adiwele, which, again, like we mentioned of Taliban and Ankole, the ANC is very creative in coming up with these political euphemisms. But the point that I'm making is that we must not discount what this means as consistent to what was happening in KwaZulu-Natal in the regions and in the regions positions for secretary and chair, and what is the mood elsewhere in the country around an opposition to or an alternative to Ramaphosa. And so I've been saying, Paul, that sometimes we have to look beyond the obvious, that it may not be a simple thing of, will this win derail Ramaphosa's second term? But I don't think it will derail his second term. But I think it may just be a very poisonous chalice that he will be given come December.
Yeah. With this win, you make mention of how it throws a spanner in the works. We know that he is set to do, close the conference with his statement later this afternoon. And there's been a lot of talk around that and perceptions on how he may be received. Will he receive a cold reception? What's your take on that? And perhaps the symbolism of him indeed making his closing statement in the midst of the current climate at the conference?
So it's not completely abnormal for there to be a hostile reception to an ANC president in an ANC structure. I mean, we saw it in the Zuma years. For example, ANC Gauteng was a no-go area for Jacob Zuma in a certain time of his leadership. And so the hostility towards Cyril Ramaphosa as a result of this win is kind of inevitable, right? Because the campaign for Siboniso Duma and Bekentolo and their leadership slate was on the back of, you guys have mistreated Zuma, and our election results of last year was as a result of us icing out former President Jacob Zuma. And so there is going to be that hostility. The question is, the president of the ANC is, damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. And then there's also this, the contestation of whether the current newly elected leadership wanted him to come or not. And there was a suggestion that they did not want him to come and close the conference. And I mean, he's closing a conference is symbolic because it kind of asserts his stamp as the leader of the ANC in a very pivotal ANC conference. Paul Mashatile is there, but there is the sense that when a conference of the ANC, as important as the ANC KZN conference, closes, there needs to be this kind of stamp of this is the president and he's giving the marching orders to this newly elected leadership of whatever structure it may be. Yeah. And so there's been this back and forth. There is this suggestion that it's maybe too hostile for him to appear there. There is the suggestion that he cannot be cowardly in this moment, and that he actually needs to show up despite the fact that he may be booed, or he may be that the mood is very hostile towards him. It's 3:30. There's this back and forth that's existing now. That the latest is that he will present. He will close the conference. Again, you cannot underplay whatever happens. If it goes smoothly, or if they choose to be openly hostile towards him, both will be a significant political indicator of what are the pitfalls and speed bumps that the president will face in the months to come.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time and that analysis by politics editor at News 24, Qaanitah Hunter. Very interesting take on the manifestation of the Adiwele movement there, the young leaders trying to take up positions within the ANC leadership.